Hello, listeners. Good morning, good evening, good day, maybe even good night. How are you today? We are up to episode 59, and it is my pleasure today to bring you a guest from Canada. This is the first time, I believe. I'm sure someone will fact check me here, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've had a guest from Canada. And look, it's no ordinary guest by any means. We've talked to trophy hunters, we've talked to trophy horse, but today we have the privilege of talking to a guide writer who facilitates this disgusting behavior that we all participate in. Now, he's an upstanding guide writer as well. He doesn't do this spam, this skipping, all this sort of garbage. So it's going to be fantastic to get his input and his views on people like me, I suppose, as we go today. And maybe some of our other gamers as well. Now, I'm talking here of the wonderful TigressLion Sean here from Knoef's Guides. Now, he goes by here, a wicked platformer and engaging visual novels are his things. Writes guides and design stuff. Also, our RNG machine for giveaways. So, how are you today, sir?
I'm quite well. I clearly can tell that you read that from the profile description on the site.
I did.
When we started the site, when we started the profiles on the site, Mick had to fill those in, and it generally went by our early guide work, and one of them was Kid Trip, and I had volunteered to do that one. So because I was able to get the plat on that, the platforming skills appeared into that bio somehow. I wouldn't go by it though, because I'm not a platforming kind of guy. It just happened that we just happened that way.
Okay. Because when I read that, I was like, "Oh, it's another skilled gamer," and they're everywhere these days. It's
No.
such a shame. But before we just like dissect the rest of this, what is your role as the RNG machine? What does that involve?
Well, so early on in Knoef, we there was quite a few hiccups. We've do a lot of giveaways, and we've had some feedback and backlash on the winners. A lot of the time, there was at one point for about a month or two that people kept speculating that we only cater to winnings towards Irish people, and it was a very odd accusation because one of our biggest fan base are Brazilians and Spanish and that region. So I have no idea where the Irish accusations came from, and we eventually had to put a stop to that. I mean, any negative press, yes, it's publicity, but I mean, it's still bad. So we had to change the way we do things, and I'm very good with numbers. I'm very good with pictures and bios and stuff. And I mean, when we do our giveaways, it specifically states that to qualify for the giveaway, you have to retweet it. Your account should have a profile picture and a bio, just so we know that you're not automatically recognized as a bot, and that you at least tweet a little bit, so you're not just a retweeting profile only there for the giveaways. So I'd say about if 100 people enter our giveaway, maybe about 70 out of those 100 won't qualify. It's quite a large portion that completely flat out doesn't follow the qualifications for the giveaways. So I really get to know the faces in which people are and which people do. And because I handle all of the tracking management of everything at Knoef, I can remember, hey, this person won this time. I like pictures, and I can be, well, I know that guy. He was chosen as winner back in November. I'm not going to put him. I'm not going to put that guy as another winner in December. We kind of rotate it. So if there's only 40 people that keep qualifying, eventually they're all going to win something. So we got to rotate
Hmm.
it. And we try to make it so everybody gets a chance to win once. So a lot of the times it won't. A lot of the times it won't. It'll be brand new people or people who haven't won in months and months and months. And we really like to rotate it. So I manually make sure everybody gets a chance.
Okay, I like that. So this could be the time, listeners. I know many of our listeners have engaged in your giveaways, but if not, it might be time to check that you're doing it right because it sounds like it sounds very above board. You have a great chance, and I mean you guys are doing a ton of giveaways every week or two. I see stuff up there too, so
Yes.
it's definitely worth checking out on
Oh yeah.
Twitter. Now I do want to get into you, but seeing we've opened the door here on Knoef, I just have one more question. I'm sure we'll come back to it later, but can I ask now? Knoef is a dog, isn't he? He's what the site is based around. He's the mascot. So,
Yes.
look, as a trophy hunter and as a guide writer, what sort of editorial say does this dog have over your wall?
So Knoef is our mascot. He's the one that's on the front middle of our page when you log
Hmm.
in. And Mick Mick has Knoef. He also has a cat. I'm not even going to pronounce his name. I know it's like Muis or Muis or something. It's I think Dutch for mouse or something. He really enjoys his animals and he loves his dog. So for publications through Mick, he could do it with his dog all the time. I handle a lot of the publications myself, and I don't have Knoef here, and I don't necessarily phone up Mick, but I mean, there's a lot of times we do. We in fact on our server I programmed the bot that's on our server, and we have a couple commands that when we type in certain commands, a picture of the cat will come up, or different things that pull up the familials that are part of our team. So they get tossed around quite a bit.
Yeah, I like that. It's a large sized dog as well. I had no idea till I read the specs on that thing, and it's massive. So I think listen. I think it's worth checking out. But look, let's leave that to the side now. Let's start with you. Now, can we start with how did you get into gaming? What's your sort of history with gaming?
So I've been gaming my whole life. I don't remember my very first games. I have my parents tell me that it was things like Mapland and different really early childish games on Nintendo and stuff. Nintendo was my start though. I know I had the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo. Then I had for when I got into grade one, I had gotten the N64, and I went from the N64 to PlayStation, and PlayStation was a really big time for me. Because I was a little bit older, I wasn't such a child. I can recollect a lot of my memories and nostalgia from that time. And I remember my PlayStation. My dad had got me a PlayStation, and I don't know, I don't know why, but it was half gray, half green. I don't know if the case broke at one point or something, but there was a rebuilt case and half it was see-through green. So it was very unique PlayStation to me. But most of my gaming memories start there. I did bounce back and forth between PlayStation and Nintendo for a while, but PlayStation is where I stay. Even though, in terms of gaming, the Nintendo GameCube is probably my favorite system. Not in terms of that it's a great system, but in terms of gaming library and the ratio or percentage of great games compared to bad games. I find that the Nintendo GameCube for me has the most amount of games that are great in my opinion in reflection of poor quality games. Out of my top 10 favorite games, probably about 6 or 7 of them are all on the Nintendo GameCube. So so Nintendo will always hold a special place in my heart, but I find that ever since I trophy hunted, I don't tend to facilitate towards Nintendo as much.
Interesting.
It's not that I don't. I still really enjoy games without trophy hunting. It's just I feel trophies force me to seek out 100% of a game, whereas without it, I can put a game down and forget about it and not feel the urge to complete it.
That is interesting. Okay. So that opens the door then. I mean, you've sort of said it there, I think, but what sort of a trophy hunter are you? Would you classify yourself as a completionist then because of the trophies? Or
I had a very messy trophy start. I can't say I'm particularly any trophy hunter classification now. I'm more of a mixed bag, a hybrid, if you will. In the beginning, I didn't have kids, so I had a lot more of a financial income. And then, so I was able to buy bigger games and buy games that I like. And
Hmm.
because of that, I wasn't as much of a trophy hunter back then. I was just buying the games for playing. Then after I had my kids and I'm on disability and stuff, I don't have as much of a financial leeway as I did.
Mhm.
So a lot of the times when I buy PlayStation games before joining Knoef, I would only be able to afford $5 to $10 a month on gaming. So I would buy so when I buy a game, I would now have to 100% complete that game to get my full money's worth. Because I need a game to last me the month until I can buy new games the next month or see what's on PlayStation Plus or different means. So I always had to buy games that could last me a while and all that. So with my profile now, after that, all the games I didn't trophy hunt properly in the beginning completely wrecked my percentage. In the beginning, I was at something about 35% completion ratio. It was pretty abysmal. And then, because as I said, I only had $5 to $10 a month to spend on games, I had my PlayStation Plus, so I tried to get my most money out of it, and I started up every single PlayStation Plus game that came out. A lot of them weren't very good, a lot of them were difficult, a lot of them required more than I could do. So then I just had every kind of genre on my profile. And now I've got incomplete games, terrible genres, games I don't like, games I can't finish. It was just an awful profile.
Mhm.
And then I really learned I don't like online games. So then I had all these online games. So the factor of my completion and properly going forward only really started about 2 years ago. But there, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But before that, it was just 6 years of just
Mm.
this hoarding trophies of everything. And it really wrecked my profile. So now it's trophy hunting for me is more so guide writing. You'll notice if you look at my profile, pretty much 100% of the games played are entirely guides. There's a couple that aren't, just a very few, but it's almost always facilitated towards guides now.
Now, I want to pick up on that point because I want to ask you about something to do with that in a moment. But just before we do, why don't we go to your PSN name then, TigressLion? Now, we tend to ask here: is there a bit of history behind that, or do you want to elaborate a little on that as well? Why you chose the name?
Sure, it's not so much. It's not a lot of history. I'm not a big fan of names that have things like if I was to be Lion 74156. I like having very precise, very clear-cut names. Lion, of course, it would have been taken, and if not too short. But when I had gotten the PlayStation, it was mine and my wife's, so it was a joint account. And I've gone by Lion for a long time, and in the beginning, Lion was mine, and a counterpart to a lion would be a lioness. But having a profile called Lioness Lion just doesn't flow as well. So we chose the female counterpart to a tiger for Tigress. So she's the tigress, I'm the lion. So it's a joint account betwixt the both of us. I'm just the lion portion. Though in terms of in terms of gaming, she doesn't really trophy hunter game. So 98% of stuff on the profile is all me.
That's a great equilibrium. I like the balance there. It's very zen. That's lovely. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing that I didn't realize. Now, I'm not familiar with this word. I know this is your Twitter handle, the Otaku. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes. Otaku.
Yeah, the Japanese word. So I looked it up here. A young person who is obsessed with computers or particular aspects of popular culture to the detriment of their social skills. Now, is that sort of correct, or would you like
I would love
elaborate?
to touch base on this. Yeah, I can I can elaborate on this. So I'm proud to be an otaku. I'm very proud of that.
Hmm.
I love the term otaku. I love what it represents. I love the culture of it. What I don't like is the term weeb. It's a very tossed around term nowadays. Everybody online's always seen the term weeb when it comes to Japanese culture. I don't like that. But I mean, otaku also gets slandered as well. Otaku doesn't necessarily mean technology. Otaku is more so one's care for their hobby to a great deal. I mean, in Japan, you can have anime otakus, you can have manga otakus, you can have gaming otakus. You can even, it doesn't even have to be a hobby so much. You can have military otakus and different otakus that facilitate anything towards a hobby of some sort. So anybody who loves different helicopters in the army or has catalogs and just sheer knowledge of military prowess, for example, would be a military otaku. An otaku is just a terminology for somebody with a great fervor, a zealous, a passion for their hobby, to almost what would outside of Japanese culture be classified as a sort of obsession to some point.
That's a better grounding for me. As I said, I'm not used to that word. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, you've got some good handles
Yeah.
on these different medias and PSN. It's good. It's very clever. I like that. Now, look, why don't we shift in? So we've alluded to guide writing and stuff like that, but I'd like to come back to that if that's okay. What if we do a little bit of games first, and then as I said, I do want to get into that because I think it's interesting. I mean, the predominantly our listeners are gamers. Now they use guides, every day they game. Most of them, probably many from Knoef's site as well. So it is interesting to see the other side. But as I said, before we get into that, why don't we turn to your profile a little bit, which I'm enjoying a lot because it's so diverse in what you play. And I'll throw it to you. Why don't you start? What would you like to share with us about what you've been playing in the last week or so, or liberally, liberally?
Yeah, liberally. I'll be liberal. If I'm going to talk about anything and bring up anything, the very first I could be butchering the name, but I call it Operencia, Stolen Sun.
Mm.
I have a special place in my heart for that. A lot of times we'll get press releases and we'll get press emails from companies. And in March, I wasn't too swamped in March, so I picked up a few games and I had seen a trailer for Operencia, and I was like, you know what? I cover a lot of visual novels, but outside of visual novels, RPGs are also another is my secondary home. And I saw a trailer for it, and I thought it could be all right. I'm not doing anything fancy right now. I'm not doing anything big. I could touch base on it and just take it. So I went in with very little expectation, and it not only surprised me, but it surpassed every conceivable notion of what I loved. I mean, I went in with no expectation, came in with one of my favorite PlayStation 4 games, one of my favorite games I've played in a very long time.
I've heard you sing the praises of this. Like we were joking a little bit earlier this week about this Operencia, The Stolen Sun by Zen Studios. Now, what is it exactly? So it's a dungeon crawler, a first person dungeon crawler. Is that correct?
It's essentially a first person dungeon crawler, yes, but it's very different than a lot of dungeon crawlers now, because a lot of dungeon crawlers you'll see by Idea Factory or different. A lot of imported Japanese games do a lot of dungeon crawlers, also like Shiren the Wanderer and stuff. A lot of it's
Hmm.
third person, or it's above the field and you're doing tile work, and it's generally you go through floors, you delve, you get items, you come back, you change dungeons, etc., etc. But not so much with Operencia. It's 12 dungeons, I believe 12 dungeons, and unlike most dungeon crawlers, this one is not randomly generated. This one is not procedurally generated. This is everything is where it is. It's there, made from the beginning, but it still has that dungeon crawling experience.
I was just going to touch on that. That's something that I actually quite like. I don't know how you feel about that, but I mean, I'm playing Persona 5 Royale at the moment. It has a section where it is procedurally sort of generated dungeons with these random encounters that just keep materializing, and it does become very frustrating in these sort of games. I find it really it harms the flow. So is that something you liked in this game then, that it was these preset enemies, or?
See, I grew up on RPGs, not visual novels. Visual novels didn't enter my life until later, so RPGs
Hmm.
were my bread and butter for my life, and it doesn't bother me. Procedurally generated, randomly generated, don't bother me, but how Operencia handled it was so remarkably beautiful because they don't. Every enemy in the game is preset and made there from the beginning. So I never counted the enemies, but let's go with the number 100. So when you start the game, there's 100 enemies in the game. You defeat 100,
Mm.
that's it. There's no more enemies ever at all to battle. They're gone. So you have a sense of getting the battle without that constant every 3 steps you're going to get into a battle, but it allows you to really explore the dungeon, really get a view the scenery, get a really try and look for every secret without an encroaching feeling of I want to explore, but I'm going to get into a battle every 2 steps, and it really hinders on your exploration. There's none of that in Operencia. You know where the enemies are. There's no encroaching kind of monkey on your back. It's just what it is.
Yeah, I like that. And then, how approachable is this for someone that's not versed in these older school style games? I mean, difficulty curve wise, and how would you talk to that?
Really depends on if you're a trophy hunter or not. If you're a trophy hunter, the legend trophy
Mm,
requires you to do 2 out of 4 of the difficult settings being on hard mode. If you're not going for trophy hunting, you can play with it
mm,
all on regular mode. Even in that aspect, there is a you can change your party up to fit your play style. But even going for the platinum, there isn't the traditional sense of an inn or a rest in this game. In this game, to restore your party's health, you need to rest at a campfire, and the campfires are lit using firewood. But the firewood in the game is limited, so you got to strategize on
mm.
when to rest. But you also got to play with you get uh, single use potions that every person in your team can use, and it increases with quantity if you buy extensions in or expansions in the shop. So you can have healing potions that heal your team, healing potions that revive people, healing potions and stuff that you don't necessarily need to rest for. Now these go away, but when you rest, your potions refill. So you not only have to strategize when to rest, you have to strategize when to use your potions, strategize on when you level up, you also replenish all your health and stuff. So you got to manage your experience and go, I don't need to use a potion because I'm going to level up next battle. Yeah, you got to strategize all your inventory and all your uses. Now, I do want to say it is liberal with the firewood. Upon completing the platinum with both difficulties set on the hard, I think I had somewhere around 25 to 30 firewood still left over. So it's very liberal, and even if you're not good with this genre, it's very liberal.
Okay, that's it. One of the things that I liked. Like, I actually started this game off your recommendation. A month or two ago. I forget now. It was a while
Mm,
ago, and like many things, I started it, and then I thought, well, I might just wait because I knew you were working on a guide, and I'll just have a glance at it because it's a bit of a
mm,
time investment just to know. And at that stage, I did play it on easy. I didn't actually look into the hard and stuff, but having read your guide, I really like this option with this hard mode. It's not something you see a lot in these games where you have options, almost filters that you can choose what to add. I know there's one there for taking the mini map away. There's as you mentioned here, saving manual saves or whatever else, making the enemies more difficult and stuff. And I also really like from a trophy point of view that you only need to put 2 of the 4 on, not all 4 on.
mm.
Is that
Oh god, that'd be a
it,
nightmare.
it really would be. But one of the other things that I really like too, and I wish that and I'm going to preface and say longer games, like you've said here, this is sort of 26 to 34 hours. So, I know it's not 100 hours, but that's
Mhm.
still a sizable amount of time. The fact that it does have a point of no return, which you very clearly marked in your guide, so you can actually go back, I believe. Is that correct? And get all the collectibles and things,
Yes.
which I think is fantastic.
So unlike other RPGs where per se it'll be a point of no return, it'll say this is the final dungeon, and you'll have a long amount of work left. The Operencia doesn't. The point of no return is the final boss. Once you beat the final boss, the game's over. So the point of no return is the literal very end of the game. So you go right there, and it literally tells you in your face, this is the end. So you can just go, you know what? No, it'll turn you around. You collect everything, and come back. There's no missables except for the one hit enemy because, as I said, enemies don't respawn in the game. So you have to make sure you save an enemy. I have a recommendation in the bottom of Lake of Anna for that. There are a couple different areas that you could do it in, but Lake of Anna has the weakest enemies in the game, so that's where I saved it for.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to this chat today, listeners, because I think we're gonna touch on quite a few games that perhaps go under the radar, and I definitely think this was one of them, this Operencia. But let's go on to another one. What else would you like to share?
I do really want to share. There's a free-to-play game that came out yesterday called Island Savers, and it's done by it's published by, if I think if I'm remembering correctly, the National Westminster Bank. It's a bank over in England. A lot of times people pass on free-to-play games because usually they're filled with microtransactions or they're not good quality and stuff. But no, Island Savers is a remarkable game. For free-to-play games, it's astoundingly wonderful. The National Westminster Bank had started a program to teach children banking for the future and stuff, and this game is one of their steps in that. And the way they manage it is so well. I don't know if you're familiar with the title Slime Rancher. It was originally on Steam for a while and then on PS4. This
Hmm.
game is pretty much a child's Slime Rancher. But instead of handling slime, you handle cleaning up the environment and taking care of animals. And through that, you have to manage your bank account. You get interest, you get taxes, you get currencies, you get loans, you get debts, you get payments. It really teaches kids everything, but through something as qualitative as Slime Rancher. It's remarkably well made, free to play game.
Interesting. Yeah, this is one that you mentioned it came out yesterday. I didn't realize, so I'm definitely going to look into this myself. And I believe I'm not sure. I was reading about this that there is a DLC for a few dollars. It's not essential in completing the game, but apparently that's for charity. That DLC is donated to charities, so it's a
Yes, 100% of it's donated to charity,
yeah.
and it's a few dollars. I
Hmm.
believe I downloaded it on my European account, so I know it's £4. I don't know any other. I don't know the other cost.
Yeah.
But no, it doesn't come with any more downloadable. It doesn't have downloadable trophies. Doesn't affect the base game. That you can. It's just extra. Now, because it's based on kids, it is they lock the dinosaurs behind the DLC, and I know my kid loves dinosaurs, and it is a really good game that I don't normally buy DLC, but I might just do it for this because it's charity and it's great. It teaches my son a lot, and it's really really good program, and it's a great game, so I don't mind.
Okay, nice, nice. That's Island Saber. Now, if it's okay here, I'd like to ask you about a game on your list. I'm not sure if you're writing it for a guide or you're just playing it for yourself. You can let me know here. But this Grand Blue Fantasy Versus game, how are
Yeah,
you?
I'm doing I'm doing a guide on that.
Good, good. I'm glad somebody is. How are you finding it?
You know, I am the I am the quintessential worst person for arcade fighters. I am the paragon of failure for arcade fighters. Uh, I,
Mm,
I'm awful at them. So I mean, what an average Joe would find being a 2 or 3 difficulty out of 10 for an arcade fighter, I would find an 8, 9, or 10 easily. I can't coordinate arcade fighters. I don't do the combos. I'm awful. I get frustrated, and it doesn't do me any justice. But Grand Blue, I have to say, is for
mm.
trophy hunting. It is probably one of the easiest and most accessible trophy lists and accessible arcade fighters ever. So almost all the trophies, pretty much half the trophies will be do 10 of the special moves for each character. Now, you can do the regular combos and instigate them, but Grand Blue also for beginners has the R1 button, which does the preset combo, and then you just have to push X and do a quarter circle. So they have buttons that do preset inputs to help alleviate that difficulty. I abuse the hell out of that, and it lets you get those 10 really easily. The other ones are to do story mode, and just in case you're like me and you're awful, story mode is ran co-op. They'll either do it 1 and 2 player co-op or 1 and computer co-op. Now, the AI that runs with you is just as good as the AI that fights you. So, in my case, I'm getting carried by the computer the entire game because I'm awful. But it's working. It's going.
Yeah, it's a. I've played this myself. I really enjoyed it. It's very. I mean, it's no surprise. This is a massive following in the East, in Japan and stuff. So it's no surprise that
Yes.
it's high production value. And I mean, it I want to say it was only recently ported, I think, to the West anyway, a month or two ago,
Mhm.
which is great. So I'm not sure how much traction it has here, but yeah, I echo what you say. The funny thing is with the story mode too is you can actually put your own player at computer controlled as well if you wish, and then you can watch the fight, which is, I know it's a little cheesy, but it does work on an RPG system, the story mode, a leveling system, so you can farm levels that way to make the game a little easier for you. One of the trophies I'm going to be interested to see, I see you haven't got it yet. It's the bane of this game, is of course the luminary blade from a random drop in effect with the tickets. So I'm not sure whether you're going to have a strategy for this in your guide that's going to alleviate playing the game a second time on hard, or
That luminary blade is one of two things you could do. The second running on hard mode where you get to the last boss, because when you go into the store setting, it tells you who drops it, so you know where to get it. You just got to make sure it's on hard mode to fight that boss. The problem is doing the second playthrough. You can get it through the ticket drop
Mm,
system, but it's such a low percentage. I mean,
mm,
if you're really that bad and the AI can't carry you per se, you could just refuse to use your tickets at all the whole game, get to the very end of the game, and when you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tickets, cloud save your file, toss in the few hundred tickets, don't get it, download your save, and you do it. Yeah, it might take you a few hours with really bad luck, but I mean, I'm no stranger to RNG.
yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. Sorry, that was the strategy that I'd heard of as well. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
I'm going to try the hard mode, but I don't know how well I'll do. I'll probably list both in the guide, but I I always try to do the guide fully to my best.
Yeah, I like that. Now, the other one I want to ask you about here, we've never talked about this game. I've actually played a bit of this game as well. I don't see a lot of it. Again, it's a Koei Tecmo game here. This Warriors are now Orochi 4. I'm gonna stab at the pronunciation there. Yeah, this is a Musou game. Yeah. Now, I don't know. Do you like these sort of games? How did you get onto this?
So Warriors Orochi 4 is my first entry into Orochi, but not my first entry in a Musu game. My first entry into a Musu game was Dynasty Warriors 3. I think it was 3, back on PlayStation 2, I believe. I'm probably going to get that wrong. But I believe it was the third, and I had been a fan of Dynasty Warriors since then. And they come out every year, different installations, different side games. So I've been a Musu fan for a long, long time. Now, when I get with my wife doesn't game, but I game, so I want to game with her. It's very stereotypical that partners want to game together, and I tossed a couple games her way, and as a matter of fact, Musu games are one of the very few games she thoroughly enjoys. So Musu games became a way my wife and I game together. And we've always followed the Dynasty Warriors series because that's the one I introduced her to. That's one she's comfortable with. That's one we run with. Warriors Orochi 4 is the very first entry into into the Orochi. And within the very first time playing it, we found it already better than Dynasty Warriors just in its entirety. That's because of the magic mechanics implemented in Orochi. We love the use of the magic, and this one I believe has a roster of over 170 characters, and there's a lot of females in this, so my wife really gets to have her field day of who to choose.
It's interesting because, again, this is another, like, I mean, I don't want to say high production, but it is for these style of games. We just don't, a lot of Western gamers don't play these sort of games. So I think, you say high production or AAA, and they think of, your Ubi and all this sort of garbage, your Assassins, but these games, they're great. They have so much to them in depth as well. But I found this one, it was a good pick up and play one. Some of these games intimidate me, like the Dynasty that you were referring to.
Now, Warriors Orochi 4, in terms of Musu games, is a very approachable platinum to achieve. So, I mean, if you're wanting to get into a Musu game and you're a trophy hunter, Orochi is a very good place to start. Something like Dynasty Warriors, Empires, or Romance of the 14 Kingdoms, with a lot of strategy and a lot of political choices and a lot of different systems and mechanics in place, is a much more difficult approach. But Orochi is a great place to start. And the other nice thing I like about Orochi, as you said, high production value. I don't like AAA games, not very much. They're very few and far between. I enjoy a AAA game.
Mm.
What I love about Orochi is the sheer amount of numbers. The numbers, the colors, the whole on screen, the ensemble, and everything. So anything that has a lot of flashy colors, big numbers, kind of all go out glitz and glamour, I really enjoy. One of the ones that reminds me of that is Nice America does a game called Lapis X Labyrinth, and
Ah, yes.
it has this little jewel time that pops up constantly as you get treasures and gems and money and a whole bunch of combos and stuff. And I played that just for the combos. That's what attracted me.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah, it's good. These sort of the games too that I think they need to be a little bit supported in the West, because it would be a tragedy if games weren't ported anymore and we had to go back and work these things out in Japanese or something in their non-localized form. So it's great to see.
Yeah, see, I do like my Japanese games. I do like all my imported games. They're my favorite genre of games, my favorite kinds of games.
Mm,
And the problem with importing them is there's a lot of censorship. I'm not going to get into the censorship
mm,
aspect because I mean that could spark a whole debate, and
mm.
I don't want to cause a war on here. I don't like the censorship, and I'm not going to say who's right or wrong, but I mean because of cultural beliefs and differences, it's just I get in the case of something like Spike Chunsoft does Crystar. The opening of Crystar had the main character's original opening showed the cleavage of her butt, and she's a 15-year-old girl, so they had that removed, and that's fine. I get that. But in other games where you're playing 18 plus old games and stuff, and they remove thighs, they remove belly buttons, they remove cleavage and stuff, I'm a little offended there because there are other games like The Walking Dead Virtual Reality just came out, and you can rip people apart in that. You can stab me. You can literally just murder for joy in that. And it's just I'm a little bit more offended for murdering for joy than just seeing a belly button. I mean, there's got to be a fine line somewhere.
Yeah, look, yeah, you're right. It is a can of worms, but I totally agree. I mean, I think it's a double standard on many fronts, and I think unfortunately the Japanese developers are copping the brunt of it, which is bizarre for Sony. But
Hmm.
I mean, the only saving grace is that the Microsoft is, and I know you're a PlayStation gamer, so this probably doesn't help you, but Microsoft has made such great inroads in the last years with Japanese developers, and with many of these games now moving across to that system as well, and them showing less desire to censor these games as well. I think that bodes well for because the problem is with a lot of these games that the Japanese versions are not necessarily censored. They're being sold uncensored. It's just the Western
Oh
releases
yeah,
that are, which is just
yeah.
I don't understand either. So, but you're right. That is,
Now the funny thing is when I was growing up, Nintendo was always the family friendly system. I mean, when I was a wee little lad, you couldn't find a single Nintendo game that would say any cursive word or anything. And nowadays, Nintendo is generally the system you want to go to if you want uncensored Western games. If you want, they're pretty much out of consoles, one of the least censored.
that is interesting. Now, the problem with your list is there's many games here that I want to talk about. Some that I'm going to bring up as we get into the guide. So I'll just ask about one more before we move towards that here. And this is this Tools Up. This is from a few weeks ago that you played this. I've played a little of this. So again, this is a game you can play in co-op. I imagine this is quite a fun game in co-op. How did you find this?
Oh, well, okay. Before I continue, before I get on that, I had won this through a Twitter contest. So they were giving away games for the whole COVID-19 games, and a whole bunch of companies jumping on ship of giving games away. So I got tools up through that. I figured it's a game I can play with my son or my wife, and it ended up just being a wife and son game because I put my youngest son to bed. So mainly the wife and my eldest child that play that game. I do get to come and join in with it sometimes, but it's a really good game. I do like the co-op games like the Overcooked series or series like that that have a lot of reliability on cooperation. The nice thing about Tools Up, though, is unlike Overcooked and other co-op related games that require the management of both people working in harmony, is that Tools Up, you can turn off the timer so it removes all stress. So, I mean, a child can play it with an adult without any ill intent of a rush or feeling like he'll lose or he won't be good enough. Whereas Overcooked, for example, you run out of time, you're out of time.
That's a perfect analogy. I was just thinking. In fact, there's a game that came out in the last week, Moving Out, which is a similar style of co-op game where you can also that you can't turn the timer off, but they have an assisted mode which almost doubles the timer, which makes it very manageable. Which I think I
Yeah.
understand. There's people hardcore gamers or whatever, they don't want these things, but I really like these sort of features. I think it does exactly what you say. You can always have a trophy if you need to finish in a time limit, that's fine. But having these options just to relax things so you can enjoy the game it's great.
Oh, it does. It's by Team 17. Team 17 does a lot of nice little niche games that I enjoy. I mean, I haven't played their games in a while, but the last one I enjoyed was the Escapists.
Mm.
If you enjoy the Escapists, they have another series coming out soon called The Survivalists.
Okay, why don't let's shuffle across listeners. So look, I don't we'll give Sean a little rest here because we're getting him to we're getting him we're exhausting him, I think, which is fantastic. It's lovely to have just a conversation about games, though. I mean, last week we joked before we started, but having a Kumon, it's very trophy focused or whatever, which is wonderful. But it's nice to sort of hear about some of these games that do get lost on the store. And so, in that light, listeners, I'll just throw a little love this week on this Infinite Beyond the Mind. So, this is a game published in the last week or so by Blowfish Studios by the developer Emily Koyo. So, this is a platformer, a retro futuristic. They classify it platformer. Look, I'm not a platformer gamer by any stretch. I like this game to start. It does get progressively difficult as it goes on. I also find the controls to be I'm not perhaps the opposite to floaty, particularly in the final two bosses. They're very stiff. Now, if you play a lot of these games, maybe you like that, but it was too much. It was too much for me. I thought the game, it starts off good, and it just progressively by the end. I didn't like the boss mechanics at the end. I won't obviously spoil it or whatever, but it's pretty clear from the beginning that you're after the queen or whatever else. It becomes very sci-fi and futuristic. The boss fight for some reason is broken into two halves. The movements are random, or seem to be randomly generated, and the platforms don't give you enough space. So I think there's a few issues there. But where this game really shines is the music. The music is just fantastic in this game, and I didn't source the composer. I apologize, listeners, but for that alone, it's worth the couple of bucks as well to play it. Now, if you are a bit of a trophy whore as well, I understand no one's guided it yet, but there's an inbuilt developer glitch in this game. At any point in time, if you double tap the L1 button, you can skip levels, and if you double tap the R1 button, it actually puts you right at the final level of the game. So that alleviates all pressure on the speedrun trophy of finishing the game in under 1 hour, which would be a little bit tricky if you tried to do it legit. It also takes the pressure off of there's a trophy there for killing very few enemies. So by doing that glitch or whatever else, it puts you right at the end to do that. So from a trophy perspective, I imagine this game could be quite easy. There are collectibles, but Sean, someone might have to write a guide for us there to find those or whatever else. But look, that's fine. And then I'll also throw out here, only because I know it can you guys do a few guides. Now I'm going to butcher this name for Yandusoft or Jandusoft. I'm not sure that.
I always call him Jandu. So I mean,
Good. That's what I.
butcher it with me.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. So they've done some good games in the past. I believe were they the ones behind the Calamity as well? Just recently, I think they were the TV show one as well. The publishers there, which I quite enjoyed, a top-down shooter. Their latest offering here, Emma. This is a platformer. Unfortunately, it's for skilled gamers. But it's fun, Sean, because it's a one button game almost. In that it's all cross button. You just push the cross to jump. It's sort of an auto runner platformer. There is a dash, but other than that, you're jumping off walls to change directions. It's kind of fun. The levels are incredibly short, like 10-15 seconds each or something. Once you see the path, and they do have collectibles which make you really think outside of the box to how you'll get the feather. The easiest way through the level will usually not get you the collectibles, so you have to look at that. I would suggest looking at a guide. Again, I bought this game not for the gameplay, but because of the soundtrack. It does have a fantastic piano score that's a little bit synthesized as well towards the end or whatever, but it's good. And again, for a couple of bucks, I played it on PS4 though. I'm not sure how it would handle on Vita. And then just because we're going to get into this in the topic a little bit here, this topic of stacking, which I'm sure will probably discuss you, Sean, but. I did finally finish the Persona 4 Dancing All Night, the Asian stack. Now, what's alarming about this, listeners, is I've played this game 7 times.
Oh.
Now, look, I didn't. I know. Look, not all at once. Obviously, over the last 3 or 4 years, I enjoyed this game a lot. I enjoyed all the dancing games. I played them all now. But it's ironic that I don't really like the Persona games themselves, the mainline games, but I really like the dancing rhythm games. I mean, obviously, it's a different game with the same characters, but it's good. And if you're looking for a rhythm game and you don't know, I believe they're on sale at the moment in the sales. And look, they're very easy for rhythm games as well, particularly for Japanese rhythm games. There's no real challenge there at all. So it's just fun. But that's enough of that, Sean. It's more than enough of that, I think. Now, what I want to get into. What I want to get into is guide writing here. Now, why don't we start off with like how you got into it? And why did you start?
I never did want to write guides. I never did
Sounds
want
like a
to.
confession.
So, I never did want to write guides. I never had any intention. I don't. I never liked writing. I never liked any of that. Now, as you would have seen on your Twitter, you had recently your Twitter anniversary post, and do you remember when you joined? And I said that I joined because of PCube. So for like I think it was 4 years. 4 years, I only Twittered only for PCube, solely for 4 years, just PCube. And Knoef had put out that he's looking for a team member that would write for PCube games. And to me, it's well, I mean, I get PCube games. That's a no-brainer. I just have to learn how to write guides. Now, mind you, my very first guide for them was Kodadama, and being my very first guide ever, it was a little bit rough. I do want to go back and not so much rewrite it, but kind of really polish it up. I do plan on that, but I'm just so swamped at the moment. But I never did want to write guides. I never wanted to be part of that. It's not so much I didn't want to, it's just I've never social mediaed much before, never really got out there before, never really reached out to anybody. So I always thought when people did partnerships like content creation for companies, I always thought that they had to be somebody. They had to have a following. They had to have some sort of influence to even be considered that. I mean, me who's never been on social media, me who's never done anything, I didn't think anybody would have ever acquiesced to my requisitions of doing content creation for them. So the fact that just me, an average Joe Blow, could do it, it's like, wow, if I knew that, I may have even done it before.
So you make it sound easy, but it's not.
Depends what you want to go for. I mean, if you want to write indies, like for Ratalaika, I'm probably butchering that, Jandu, Blowfish, Digerati, Team 17, they all have smaller titles that do have games that are 3, 4, 5 hours, and those are all companies that are very, very friendly, have great PR that does welcome new, friendly people that want to get into the content creation field. So, if for anybody that wants a place to start, so that starts small and somewhere, those are all great companies to reach out towards. Same with East Asia Soft, same with sometimes Use. There's a lot of great companies that really help start up content creators that you don't have to be anybody for to do it.
That's very true, but a lot of the guides you write are not for these people. I mean, they're quite substantial, long games. So, you know,
Yes.
what's the yeah, what's the we're going to touch on some of these guides and games in it, but what's the sort of process you go into? Like, do you look at a game beforehand and go, I'd like to write a guide for that, I'd like to play it, or is it that a game sort of comes in and someone's got to write it? So, it's like it's a visual novel, or it's a sort of a platformer, or it's a dungeon crawl or whatever. I'll do it. How does that sort of work?
Well, I mean, I'm a very laid back guy, and any research I have to do means I have to do work. So I don't do that. Generally, my process of thought is
Mm.
I'll get press emails and I'll get emails that'll say, "Hey, this company is releasing this game," or I'm on. You sign up for companies' newsletters and they send you their upcoming releases, and I'll get them in my email box. And I'm like, "Oh, that looks like a nice game." But aside from just the newsletters and emails that come in, generally, I don't. I never signed up for genres per se, except for visual novels. But aside from that, when I joined Knoef, I joined for PCube solely. And then when I joined with PCube, I thought, if I can do PCube, can I do my favorite companies? So my goal was to do content creation for all of my favorite gaming companies out there. And I've managed to do that. And I've managed to do content creation for all of them, and I continue to do so. And my process of what to write for is simple. It's my favorite game company. They create a game. I'll write a guide for it. I don't care what genre it is. I don't care about that. It's my favorite company. They put a game out. I'll do it. That's it.
Yeah, I like that. I mean,
It's bit me in the ass a few times.
I can understand that, because one of the things that I hear is like, and you read is like, oh, I just want to get codes because it's free games or whatever else. And look, I understand there's an element of people doing that, but the reality is that you still have to play that game. So
Yes.
sometimes you don't necessarily want a code for it because you don't like that. Don't want to play it. And I mean, I know it's a funny position because I have access to whatever I want, I suppose. So if I want to play it, I buy it, which I think it creates a harder problem too, because now I don't want to waste 3, 4, 10 hours on a game that I wouldn't want to play for this process. So I understand you going after the companies you like. That makes a lot of sense. But I mean, there must be games that you start. I mean, it happens to all of us, that you think you wanted to do and then you don't. Now, I suppose you have to see that through. Is that how it happens, or can you just abandon it?
Generally, we at Kniff we generally try to always see it through. Always. There are a couple exceptions, such as if a game has a bunch of glitch trophies, we can't do the guide on it. So we have to wait for it to get patched. Now, some companies are slower to respond to this, and if they take 2, 3, 4 months to patch the game, by that time we may have moved on and have like 6 other games to work on, or a bunch that we don't have the time for that game that we had allotted before, and it doesn't fit our schedule. And
Mm.
unfortunately, sometimes it has to take the back burner. We do try to return the stuff, but sometimes it just gets very hectic and chaotic. Some developers or publishers just don't respond to emails, which makes it that much more difficult when we're like, we can't do anything about this game, and you're not reaching out back to us. So there are times it is difficult, but we always try to see things through.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what I want to touch on next is that one of the things that I like about Knoef, and I mean, in full disclosure, I've been a Patreon for a while. I don't think that has anything to do with today or anything, but just so it's out there, so people know, because it's the internet, Sean, and you have to do things like this, I'm told. So it's out there.
Oh
But one
yes.
of the things that I like is that there are many guide writing sites. A lot of the sites are, individual guide writers that just submit one guide here or there, obviously choose a game they want to play for. They're probably not getting a code, they just played it, they write the guide, and it goes up or whatever. There are a few sites that operate like yourselves, but there are less of these sites. Obviously they're much thinner on the ground now. Knofs has you, I think there's 7 of you now, which is fantastic. You've been growing all the time. What sort of collaboration is there between you? Are you all independently working, or are you sort of collaborating as well, or how does that go?
That's a fantastic question. So generally, everybody has their own love of their own genres. Now, I get in some teams you might have two team members that have the same love of game or love of genre, and it might cause internal struggles. But at Knoef, we don't have that. Everybody that's joined so far has a love for a genre that doesn't generally clash. There are a couple games that do clash, but we will sometimes kind of work on the guide together. But for the most part, we generally do our own games. There's not much games that we collaborate together on. That doesn't say we don't help each other, though. I mean, a lot of times we'll talk amongst each other and try and figure out different writings, and different strategies, and different ideas of how to unlock stuff. But I mean, for the most part, we don't have a lot of internal struggle, and because of that, I think we really work well together. We often help each other. We talk about what we like, and all of the games we have allow us, because of that, allow us to each tackle our own guides, which allow us to put out a constant flow of guides.
Yeah, I mean that's very true. I mean the site is becoming more and more prolific. I mean even just the other day I was shocked at how many things came up. Now, what I want to touch on then is a lot of the games that you write guides for, you personally, but also the site as well. They're not well covered games, so they're not games that already have a trophy guide. In fact, they're not games. I mean, Operencia is an example. They're not games that even have
Mhm.
a lot of information about them. So with these sort of games, are you at large times just independently figuring them out yourself, or do you have a bit of a network of other people that you can call on that are playing these games? Or I imagine that must put a bit of strain on you to have to figure it out all yourself.
So generally, 99% of the time, it's entirely me. Like for I can't speak on behalf of other members. I don't know
Of
who
course.
they
Yeah.
know, but for myself,
Mm.
99% of the time, it's generally always me figuring everything out myself. I do have a couple friends I've made on social media that are reviewers, so they do get the same games I do sometimes. You'll notice if you look at my AI Somnium files. AI Somnium files is a massive game, and it is in fact the biggest guide I've written for Knoef. There'll be a thanks to Rob Pitt, who's the owner and reviewer for Game Pit. There's a thanks to him in there because there was one collectible I couldn't find for the life of me, and now we scratched each other's back. I helped him with the knowledge of how to get the high ratings on timing, and he helped me with the missing face for the one trophy. So whenever I do need help, which I think AI is the only one I really did thank somebody for, I do mention in the guide that I thank somebody or point it out. But 99% of the time, it's mainly me figuring things out, and that has caused me some grievous sleepless
Yes.
nights.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah, it's always interested me because I've always I think I annoy many people on the system, but I'm always interested to talk to people and bridge gaps and what describing with the trophy guides and I know other people that write do collaborate and do different things, but on the trophy hunting side, I mean many of the gamers in a certain level they communicate to talk about tips that they find because often there are no guides written for these games or prices on different stores or just methods or anything to play. So there's a lot of little collaboration going there, a sharing of informations, and it does seem that there's not a lot of crossover often between guide writers and just the general gamers. Like, I mean, I looked here the other day that on kind of site here they posted that you had a record month last month, 60,000 unique visitors, and
Mhm.
like, I mean, that's a staggering number. Really, I think that's a staggering number for the guides. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah, I
Mm,
mean, I think when I joined Knoof, because I have access, like I said, to this viewers and statistics and stuff, and I can go back in the history. I think I worked it out anyways. From when I joined back in last May to this May, in a year span, we've gone up in monthly viewership of unique visitors. I think I worked it out to about 2,200% increase. Like it has been an absolute staggering percentage of how far we've come, which amazed me because to me, trophy hunting's been around for more than a decade. There's been many PlayStation hunting sites and forums far before Knoef. So to join so late in the game and see such a staggering increase in percentage absolutely leaves me just floored.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it was funny because last week, unrelated to this, but something came up about I must have mentioned a guide on Knuf or something, and someone came up, or it may not have even been that, and they just put in on the Discord actually. Oh, well, you have a relationship with them. Like, I'm not sure what was implied by that. And I was like, well, I have a relationship with a lot of different gamers and everything else, and I think trophy hunters should. But one of the things about your, kind of site, and you guys as writers and girls as well, is that you are approachable. I mean, you're one of the few sites that actually stands by your guide. You have, bits about yourself, you have pictures, and you are approachable in the Discord as well. So I can see that
Oh
there
yeah.
is big personal connection that it creates, your site with gamers as well. So I'm not surprised that you have a lot of these, continued growth in month over month, which I think is fantastic. I don't know how you feel about that.
As I say, I'm sure other people can attest to this. I say that for the most part, I'm not sure about reviewing or streaming or stuff, but guide writing, I say, is often pretty thankless. I mean, if I say in 10,000 views, one person reaches out, that's about it. I mean, you don't really ever get anybody reaching out. Sometimes we do, very rarely. I mean, in the almost 1 year I've been with Knoof, I think I just put out my 1 year will be May 25th, and I just put out I think was my 52nd guide, and out of those 52 guides, and in almost a year, I think maybe I can count on one hand the amount of people who have messaged me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, look, it's. I mean, you're actually providing a service. I mean, what we're doing here with this podcast, it's just wasting people's time. I think, Sean. But it's very similar. Nobody reaches out. Occasionally, someone will reach out and go, "It was okay this week. I could handle it." As opposed to the other weeks. But look, I understand that is the nature of people online. Now, let's move to. I want to say your favorite genre, but I could be wrong here. I only say this because you've written so many guides for this style of game. Visual novels. I mean, is it your favorite genre? Do you have a favorite genre?
Visual novels and RPGs are my favorite, so yes, they're generally hand in hand together.
Okay, good. Now, visual novels, they're long. They can be very long, by the time you read them. And as you said with the AI Somnium Files, they can be very involved as well with all the branching
They
paths.
can.
What do you like about, well, first off, how do you write guides for this? Do you write it as you're playing? Do you have do you have multiple save slots everywhere where you're testing things out? What's the process for your visual novel writing?
Uh, I think the easiest way to explain this question would be giving a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced explanation. A lot of visual novels will have a couple things. They'll have what we call flag endings or flag choices, things that will change the rest of the game. And then there'll be flags that will or won't, or will or not be unlocked depending on previous choices. So it's all about reaching the flags. And so some games, I'll list some easier ones for beginning explanations, such as Blind Men. Let's go with Blind Men from Ratalaika.
Hmm.
Only two characters to choose from, and a couple of choices. It's only a 2 hour game. I think I put 2 hours. And a handful of choices that lock you into one or the other. So generally what you'll do is there'll be a choice in the middle of the game who you tackle, and it'll be like the guy in the green or the guy in the black. Well, that would be the flag for which character. If you're going to tackle the guy in the green, you're not going to get the black suits route. So you make a diverging save there, and then what I generally do is how I do it is, since I don't skip choices and I play them through. Say after you choose the guy in the green, you'll get say four more choices, and if each choice takes 10 minutes to get through, I know that's 40 minutes. So I'll count that 40 minutes. I'll see what those choices get me. If it doesn't earn a trophy or CGs or audio clips, or any other sort of visual novel collectible, that route isn't needed. But I know it took 40 minutes. So I know it'll pretty much be about 40 minutes to take the other route. So a lot of the times I'll just rush through the routes because I know it's a 40-minute route, and I'll see which routes lead to the trophy. And then I'll go, okay, this route is the one that leads to the trophy. It took 40 minutes. And then I'll reload it and I'll read it through so I can make sure that that did account to the 40 minutes, because sometimes different scenes are a bit longer. So I'll rush through the ones, which ones give the trophy, which one has the ending, and then I'll do it and I'll go, okay, this one gave the ending. I'll play through this one properly and see if it does account to the 40 minutes. And then I'll be like, okay, that was 45 minutes, but I know that this gave the ending. It's not hard for that, because in that case, there's generally 2, maybe 3 choices to make. An intermediate would be something along the lines of, let's go with Song of Memories by P-Cube. There'll be, I think, 6 or 7 different character endings, and it'll be a 4 or 5 hour base game, and then a character's ending will be 2 to 3 hours post that. Now, it's done in the course of 31 days, and up until day 13, you'll be making choices. I think the choices don't matter up until about the 9th day, something like that. There's a couple on the 5th day that'll be 2 characters, but for the most part, day 1 to like day 9 won't count. 9 to 13 will be your flags that depict who's going to walk with you home from day 14 to 28, and then the endings happen. Sometimes 27, depending on the character. So you got to figure out where choices lead to what flags, which one branch between the 6, and the problem is sometimes it'll make you want to get every single CG in the game, and if sometimes a CG will be like in a point where it'll transfer off of a branch, so you got to figure where all the 6 people branch together, where they converge, where they join, the sideways. It gets more complicated. And those ones take a lot because you'll have to make a save, check what questions make people walk with you on day 4, day 13, 14, 15, etc. And then after that, you also have to figure out a lot of these ones will have anywhere between 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different flags. You have to find out where all the flags are, and then you got to really branch off everything and all the choices that matter. And the problem is in visual novels, a lot of the times it remembers your choices. So when you make a choice and you finish a scene, you have to check in the CGs, in the music, in every single setting that unlocks something to see if it unlocked. And then you're like, oh, okay, that choice unlocked this. I got to put in the guide. So you got to kind of, I'd say for every 5 to 10 minutes of visual novel play, there's a pause and check the menus, check everything, cross-reference, and see what unlocked. So for every 5 to 10 minutes of visual novel play, there's 5 to 15 minutes of checking and writing. So when a visual novel says it takes 30 to 40 hours to play, that's 30, 40 hours following the guide. When you write the guide, that's anywhere between 80 to 100 hours, if not more, of cross-referencing, of checking, of pausing, of reloading. Now, the ones that are expert, I'd say expert, are ones like which was an absolute nightmare, and even to this day, it's probably one of the hardest visual novels I've ever written, because you got branches, but these branches, unlike most visual novels where you read and you make choices, this one has interactive scenes. It has items to use. You can use multiple items getting different branches. You have choices, you have routes, you have cross references, you have branches that branch back onto other people's routes, and it cross paths, and it's a it's a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare to write that, and it it was so long, and it took, but I mean, I say so long, but the longest one for me was Date Alive. Now, I don't want to, I specifically want to point out Date Alive for a reason. Date Alive was not the hardest guide to write, it was the longest. That thing took me 2 months to write. And that's because it took me anywhere between, without a word of lie, a good ballpark, somewhere between 2,500 to 4,000 save files. It's because, like I said, when you make a choice in a visual novel, you have to save the game and then go check your CGs, your videos, your tips, your every sort of collectible. And in Data Live, you have about 400 tips. You have 20 pages of CGIs and 5 pages of videos. Now, in a 60-hour game, you make you make those saves and you check it. Now, in most visual novels, you push the options button, you check your menu. Data Live does not have that. You have to save the game, quit to the main menu, then go into the special settings and check it all. Then you have to go back to the main menu, reload your game, have it load, choose the next choice, and then you have to save the game, quit to the main menu, go into the special, and you have to repeat this. And because you can't just push options or start and just check the menu there, you literally have to quit the game and reload every single choice. And it took thousands of reloads and saves, and it was a goddamn nightmare.
This is fascinating. Yeah.
I don't even know why the devs. Maybe it took a memory. Maybe it was too much because it's 20 pages of CG and stuff to implement into the actual gameplay, and they have to put in the menu. Maybe. But for a guide writing, it broke me. That's the guy that pushed me the hardest.
This is fascinating for me to hear because, and I will ask you about this. There's obviously a convergence of how people play visual novels, and look, I'm not preaching by any means because I've played on both sides, of the skip game and the read game, and one of the things that is interesting for
Mhm.
me is that there are other people writing visual novel guides.
Oh yeah.
Writing is a loose, I think, I think a lot of the guides that are coming, from ports or whatever, they're really being, for want of a better word, they're being translated and copied from Japanese sites or videos, which is a separate issue. But they are predominantly the shorter VNs. There are very few people writing these full size guides like yourself here. And I know we're getting in the weeds a bit here, listeners, but I hope you indulge us here if you do play these games, or even if you don't. But these massive sort of games, there are very few people writing guides, as I said, and there's even less that are actually working it out and playing them themselves.
Mhm.
So to hear the process is fascinating. Now, this, a girl who chants love at the bounds of this world. That was the game you
Yeah.
were referring to.
That's what I classify as an expert visual novel. One that if you're a trophy hunter and you want to get into visual novels, that is not one you want to start with as a beginner. It is not.
Definitely not. But now, from my perspective here, this is actually on my coming up list to read. This is a couple down before I get here. But how I will approach this game, of course, is with your guide in hand, and I will read it. This is one of the great things that I'm so thankful for, that people like yourself are doing the grunt work here for us. Is that you can read this. The guide doesn't in any way, and the way the guides are written, they don't in any way spoil the game, because you're reading along and then you can just check for choices and stuff
Yeah.
like this, or the route or something. So you are saving, you're saving me a ton of time, obviously. But in effect, I can just read it as a story, and a continuous story, if I like, knowing that I'm making the forward progress that's required. But to hear your side of it, where, as you said, like the work that goes into it is fascinating. It's fascinating for me. I'm very interested. Now, I want to ask you a couple of visual novels that you didn't mention. You did a good job of mentioning many there, but one of my favorite ones that you did guide here, The Death Mark. How did you find this again? What do you think of it?
Deathmark is by Access. I love Access games. Deathmark, I would say, is what I would classify. Just like any other genre, people have the trope games, the ones that are recommended to bring anybody into that genre. Like when you're talking RPGs, you'd think Final Fantasy, Dragon's Quest, Elder Scrolls, anything like that. Very well known. So if I was to say visual novels have a top 5 visual novels that are to bring somebody into this genre, I'd put Deathmark in that list. It would make that top 5. It's it's not only a visual novel; it has interactivity. It's got a bit of mystery. It's got battles in it. It's got different elements, and it's really interesting. And it's a very good kind of spook. Like it doesn't so much do. There are some jump scares, but a lot of it is as you're exploring, there'll be something creepy as your flashlight goes across, and it's got really good creep factor to it. And it's generally a little bit the CGs. The one thing I love about this one is it's very uncensored. It is very graphic, and I was so happy that it remained uncensored.
It's an interesting visual novel. I mean, the reason I like it is it touches on. I mean, it touches on a lot of issues from a Japanese perspective, obviously, because it's a Japanese, visual novel. But I mean,
Mhm.
even having played a lot of visual novels, and the line is always blurred on these games. They do cross it often, but it touches on things like transgender. It touches on a rape and what that means in the Japanese culture and the shame
Mhm.
of the person raped, almost as
Yeah.
opposed to the people that did it. It touches, on the war. It touches on a lot of things in this game. So I agree with you. It's a very deep game. One of the things I find interesting, you said it's uncensored, is yes, it is very graphic, but it is censored because in the extra content or the DLC or what I think it's standard in the PS4, it even pushes it further. There's a spider torture machine, if you like. Now that was actually censored in the Western release, but not in the Japanese one. But I mean, that's a small point or whatever against the whole thing. But yeah, I'd agree with you. That is one of my favorite VNs. Now, the other one I wanted to ask you about here, I haven't played this yet either. Will a Wonderful World. I understand you wrote the guide for this.
Yes. So as I said, there's about five introductory visual novels I'd say to bring somebody in. I would put Will in that category, and it's such a shame. I want to really chat about Will. When you go on PSNP, I think it'll be like there's only like 40 players for Will for one region, like 40 for another. It's less than a couple hundred. It's an utter shame. Will is one of the best visual novels I've ever played. It's it's very unique in the way it's played. It's a one of a kind way of how it's played, how you change the story, how the chapter select is done, how the characters like every single thing about it is so well done. The only thing I will say without spoiling it is I was going to rate it like a perfect 10 out of 10, maybe 9.5. There is one character route that completely removes the immersion you have into the game to the point that it does leave a sour taste that even after platinuming of the game, you're like, because it was such a grandiose build up that it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. But I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to spoil anything. But aside from that, Will is one of the most recommended
Mm.
visual novels I can. It's what's really more interesting about Will is when you read the developers and stuff. Will, I believe, I could be wrong with this, was developed by one person, and I did tweet about the interview about it, it was, I believe, a Chinese guy in his living room that he ran this studio from. So to know that that level of detail came from just like a single person in his living room, kind of just running it off, it was fantastic to know that somebody had that much passion, and it
Mm.
shows. It shows in how well
Mm.
done it is.
Mm. What I loved about the just before we go, what I loved about this game, I haven't got into it yet, but the opening splash screen, it gets you in from the beginning. It's like I forget because it's been a while since I read it, but it's like something to the effect of grab a warm drink and settle yourself and come in close. We're about to go on a journey, and I love that fourth wall breaking. That sort of it put me in the right frame of mind to think, okay, I need to be ready for this game. So it's fantastic for me to hear you go on and say that it really is worth the time.
Yeah, if you like that sense, like the get ready and do it, get into it, and kind of like that warm atmospheric one. Another one that I played this year that I really recommend is Coffee Talk. I cannot recommend that one enough either.
Yes, that's a great one. Now let's switch slightly here. Now, visual novels are not are not what am I looking for? They're not removed from the mini game. I suppose there's many fun mini games associated with some visual novels. Now, this Kodadama, I have not played this myself, but this has. Am I right in thinking this has some sort of a Candy Crush mechanic to it, or is there some sort of matching thing in this?
Think more instead of Candy Crush. Think more of Bejeweled. It's pretty much Bejeweled, a match three scenario. It
Mm.
uh, it's not very hard. There are a couple times that I did get a game over and I lost on it. Sometimes it does get a little tricky on it's luck of what is really randomly dropped into your screen and what you choose. But I mean, it essentially is a match three screen just to get some fan service, and it's really well made. I mean, they react and they put their whole body into the twist, the animation, the non-static movements, and everything. A lot of physics, really great.
Mm. Okay, excellent, excellent. So, what I'd like to ask you then, because you're so across this genre, is if people were looking to get into this, if gamers were looking to read to get into this genre, what would you recommend? Some good starting ones.
All right, so if we're going to talk visual novels, you got to understand that there are different kinds of visual novels. If you're looking for a visual novel that is just not a lot of choices, but a lot of reading, if you're just one that really likes reading, there's one called House of, I'm going to butcher this again, The House of Fata Morgana. It's a really long game. I think writing it before the very first choice of the game, maybe you get one choice at the beginning, but I mean, the main crux of the choices don't happen until 20 hours after reading. So tons and tons and tons of reading before you even get choices. So on strict visual novel basis, House of Fata Morgana is a beautiful place to start. If you're looking for, if we're just going on places to start, House of Fata Morgana is good for text. As I said, for interactiveness, and a really good place to start would be your Deathmark that you mentioned. If you want one that is, because visual novels are really good for their twists, their turns, their stories, but sometimes it's really hard to get that level without the immersion of choices and all the different level of input without getting too difficult. So I think the one I want to recommend most that would have a heavy level of immersion, a heavy level of story, twists and turns, and absolute just sheer shock value of greatness would be, it's done by P-Cube. It's called Raging Loop. It has it has chapters select for every single choice in the game, so you really can't miss anything or mess things up. So I mean, Raging Loop, Raging Loop is a great start. Uh, Another one that has a lot of immersion, but it's really easy to platinum. Literally, the routes are choose the first answer for every letter, choose the second answer for every letter, etc., etc. Numerologically, every subsequent playthrough is root letter. So, I mean, the top five recommendations I'd say for most people would be Root Letter, Raging Loop, Deathmark, House of Fata Morgana, and I'm trying to think of a fifth one. I'm going to say there's a newer one put out this year by Circle Entertainment called My Tetsu Pier Station. I really recommend that one also. But I don't want the two I really don't want to overlook. There's one called 428 Shibuya Scramble. It is a massive one. It's got like I can't remember. I think it's 75 or 85 different endings, and it's massive. But it is so well worth it. I do want to put that out, but not for beginners. It's very, very massive.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. I've played well, is it the first act? That's the one that works on time, isn't it? You're forwarding different time, like it's within an hour or something each one, and you're seeing
Yes,
different sides
yes,
of the story. Yeah, yeah, I like that.
yes.
I like that one as well. I should go back. That is a massive one.
Shibuya Scramble also is not done animatedly. It's done live action.
That's right.
So anybody
Yes.
who's turned off by the whole anime, the animation, the Japanese uh, drawings and everything like that, 428 is a very approachable one by them if they're not afraid to get into something a little bit bigger because it's live action.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. I have a feeling we could talk about VNs forever, with you because you're so knowledgeable and I love it. But I'm very conscious of how long I'm keeping you. But I do just want to shift because I'm sure we're going to talk again in the future, so we can spend more time on
Well,
this.
of course. Would I be able to mention one
Of,
thing
of
first?
course,
Because I do here in the running sheet we have the process.
yes,
I did mention the process of how I go upon the visual novel, but I never did go upon the process of writing the guide.
yeah,
I'm sure we'll touch base on it if we're going to be here a little bit longer.
yeah,
But the one thing I did want to mention is when I started off, this is a little Knoef secret that I'll share with everybody.
excellent.
Writing guides was not easy for me in the beginning. So I didn't have a computer monitor. I only had my TV screen, and my TV was old enough that it had the monitor connected to my tower. So TV screen was also my monitor. And when you're playing a PS4, instead of pausing and then switching to the computer, I would actually have my cell phone. Now, the thing is, my cell phone's old, so it didn't really have an updated store and couldn't run most of the newer apps. So I had to use the stock Android memo pad. And that thing had, I think, like a character limit of 500 characters. So whenever I wrote guides, I would write it onto my Android stock memo app. And then when I completed the game, now the thing is, most of the time it was a little bit jot note, a little bit point form, sometimes more explanation. And then when I was done the game, I had to rewrite a guide. So up until December of last year, every guide I put out was actually written twice. Once on my cell phone, then transcribed back onto the computer. And let me tell you, AI Somnium Files, for example, is 14,000 words big. 14,000 words big. When you have, I think, like a 500 character limit in the stock memo app, I had something like, I had about, I think, like 54 pages, different sticky notes that I had to scroll through and interconnect and interweave and write. Guide writing was so hard for me in the beginning. It was the absolute worst, and it took so much effort. I mean, what would normally take anybody a day to write would take me like 3 days to write because I had to put it onto my phone, then transcribe it from my phone into the guide, and it was hell. So I mean, anything before December, anybody should really appreciate my effort.
That's amazing. That is phenomenal. Well, what just maybe to touch on process here as well before we move out of this bit, I want to ask you one of the interesting things about your guides and also the general way guides are written on Knoef guides is that they're not, especially with visual novels, they're not necessarily written in a skip format, and I use that for want of a better term, where they literally just list the choice numbers you push. Your guides as visual novel guides are usually written under trophies, and they're written in paths or whatever else, but they're written definitely from a perspective that you read the game. I mean, the timings you put there are for how long it would take to read, which I
Mhm.
respect in that way. One thing I noticed, and I'm sure it's game dependent, in the recent one that you did, this Arcade Spirits Fiction Factory games, you have written it in this format of straight numbered choices. Now, I'm sure what I'm getting at here is I'm sure you understand there are many people that skip these VNs for trophies. Obviously, a guide like this is exactly what they want because they don't want to engage in it. Are you conscious that that's what you're providing them? Do you care that it comes in that format, or is that something you don't even think about?
I do think about it usually. Now, Arcade Spirit, since you mentioned it, is a Western visual novel. It's done here. Unlike many other ones, you didn't necessarily need to collect CGs or tips or anything to do the trophies, the platinum. For this one, it was mainly all about getting the endings. So I originally had what choices added to each person's affection, what added to the overall stats. And I had that at first, and then I realized that some characters, when you get to I think it was the fifth day at the beach scene, some characters would and wouldn't be accessible depending on your stats. There were a couple ones I had trouble depicting if they needed both stats because I'd have like the blue stat and the red stat at the same level, and I wasn't entirely sure if it was the red stat or the blue stat, or some characters might need both. And I thought it'd be more confusing to the reader that because when you read a guide, a lot of times when you read a guide, you're like, oh, if it's showing a plus stat here, that's going to be important. I didn't want to give anybody the misconception or the pre-notions that certain choices were very important in getting that stat, and I didn't want to write a misinformed trophy going, Percy needs these two stats to be seen on the fifth day. I didn't want to have anybody have a misinformation. So I decided to leave it as just a strict choice format into how to set it up and get the routes because it's a Western, because of the trophy format, it didn't need to have so much collectible based. Whereas something along the lines of, say, let's talk a game I haven't mentioned yet, so it's not so confusing. All right, let's talk about Will, for example. Will, a wonderful world here. To mention it here, for example, it'll say at the very start, it'll say, I want to go home, photo 1. It'll tell you where the photo unlocks. If you choose the section, I want to go home by Lee, and you get the S rank, you'll get photo 1 1. You'll also get dictionary entry 1. You also get the profile of Lee 1's favorite sport, the tennis, the favorite toy, and the doll. And then you'll also get the mail delivery. What I don't like about the other trophy sites that when they write visual novels, like you said, in skipping format, is they will list only the choices. Now, if it's a 3-hour skipping visual novel and they make one simple mistake and they're missing one dictionary entry, well, if you're following that site, you're going to have to go, oh God, now I have to run the whole 3-hour section again to pick up where I missed. Where I don't like that. Whereas mine, you run through, you misread, you misclick something, you get to the end of the game, and you're like, oh God, I'm missing a dictionary entry. I'm missing dictionary entry 3. Well, my guide, because I stop, I pause it, I save, I go to the menu, I check every single scene. I always put where every single thing unlocks. So anybody playing, even if you didn't follow my guide, say you want to fly blindly, and you're like, hey, I played by myself, but I missed one thing, you know exactly where it was. You don't have to replay the whole thing. It literally tells you how and where everything unlocks. It gives that person the sense of security to follow my guide or play on your own and pick up the missing pieces from what you missed. It's not a dictated, you have to play it this way because I don't give you the freedom of any other way.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of what I like in these guides, in your guides as in particular here. It is that freedom. I think what interests me, and perhaps another topic, is that every guide writer I've spoken to, and I've spoken to many now across different genres and styles of games, they're all passionate about the game. Nobody is writing guides and putting the time in, as you say, for things that they don't enjoy. But these are people that are creating guides from their experience.
Mhm.
I think there's also and one of the things that I find interesting then is that many of these guide writers, though, even though they're passionate about it, they're producing guides that, in effect, whether it be point and click games or VNs, as you say, or other short games, that are the quickest optimal path that almost require the gamer not to even engage with the game anymore. Now, I understand people can make their own decisions and time and yada yada, and I understand what I do too. So I'm not being hypocritical, but it's almost like they're doing a disservice to the game too, because they're like, well, this is an amazing thing. This is what this game has to offer, but I'm just going to show you the beeline straight through here, and you don't have to experience, you don't even have to understand what's going on.
Mhm.
And I know some of these guide writers are literally just translating guides or copying them from videos. Therefore, they don't even understand themselves what's really going
Yeah.
on. So that's all they can offer. But there are other guide writers too that do understand, that are playing the game, but they're pushing this format because that's what they believe trophy hunters want, which perhaps is true, or whatever else. But for you, as you say, the way you're writing this, you're very much, you're selling the
Mhm.
game, that you play the game and you can use it as a cleanup. You should experience the game, which I think, and to you, you're probably like, well, yeah, that's obvious. You should experience the game, but there is a core, large number in this community that are just, they don't have any idea what they're playing at all. They're just being led,
Exactly.
along, and they finish and they have no idea what happened. Which is, for me, I find that I understand the irony of me saying that, but I find from someone on the guide writing side to be creating guides that allow this sort of thing, it must be difficult for them as well. So it must be refreshing for you to know that you're putting these things out for people that will actually be engaging in the game properly.
Yeah, exactly. I would, a perfect example of this. I've recently put out as you know, guide on Disaster Report 4.
Hmm.
Now, the reason this is relevant is because in it, my guide states the day, and I have each titled section on dependent on the name of the save point that you'll come across. So it's broken up into save point sections. Now, the only thing I put in the guide are the choices relevant to trophies and locations of stuff. If it doesn't pertain to a trophy or a location or a compass or an apparel, it won't be in the guide. So if you click, for example, let's see here, I'm looking at Akabanotsugi station, it'll say compass 14 is here and compass 15 is here. Talk to this person for the trophy, and don't forget to pick up the hat in the convenience store. It's not telling you that you have to get the key to the gate. You have to talk to the man to borrow his scooter. Then you've got to go across and find the president sitting on the bench. It doesn't guide you through the game. It tells you what's for the trophy, and that's it. Aside from that, it lets you have the freedom of playing the game, understanding and getting to play it without missing anything. So I mean, I don't like guiding people by the hand.
Yeah, yeah, I like that, and I think it's easy to forget that there is a core group of players that are just playing literally for the trophies, but that number, it's very small. When you look at the overall
Yeah.
number of gamers, and to be able to offer something like this obviously allows people that the trophies are almost secondary, which again sounds bizarre to say that the game shouldn't be shouldn't be
Mhm.
predominantly at the forefront, but it's not always. Look, which I don't know. I'm I'm always amazed by that. But it is what it is, I suppose. So, listeners, I hope that's given you a bit of an insight, I suppose, into what's in visual novels. Because I know a lot of people avoid them. I know a lot of people skip them, and I know there are people too that play them. But there's so much that goes into it, which is fascinating. But if I can beg your time for just a little bit longer, Sean, I know I've kept you for
Oh,
quite some time. I
that's
want to I want to ask you just a couple of guides here that are not visual novels as well, if I can, because you don't only
sure.
write visual novels. And one of the ones I wanted to ask you about here is this Ghost Parade. Now, I know that you sort of coded this guide, I think, with Stephanie. I'm interested in this game because I think it's from an Indonesian studio. It's predominantly a platformer.
That is right. The interesting thing is, Ghost Parade, for example, as you said, is done by an Indonesian company. I talked about a game earlier called Coffee Talk, which is also done by an Indonesian company. Indonesia,
Hmm.
to me, I don't think gaming when I think in Indonesia, but in the last year since I've been working with Knoef, Ghost Parade and Coffee Talk both came at me and showed me the level of passion that Indonesia has, and I look forward to what more Indonesia puts out. Ghost Parade, it's an absolutely wonderful game. There is a bit of drawback. I mean, it is their flagship title. It's their first game. So there is a little bit of lack of experience of polishing over experience that they'd have. But aside from that, the jumping mechanic can be a little bit off, and so can the platforming. But aside from that, the aesthetics is beautiful. They actually took every character in the game and drew them and based them and put the way they move and the way they're represented and the things they do in the game is all entirely based on Indonesian folklore. You're not only playing a game, you're learning their culture, you're learning their history, you're learning about what they look like and what they represent and what they do to the Indonesian culture. I mean, it's more than just a game, it's an actual story. But aside from that, it is phenomenally beautiful. It's one of the most aesthetically pleasing games I've played in a long time.
Mm, mm. It's interesting. I was reading a little bit about the developer, Alentira Nansantara. I'm gonna go with, and they describe
Yes,
themselves. I mean, you're right. This is their flagship, but they're really positioning themselves as I mean, well, they in their own words, they describe themselves as an intellectual property house, and their sort of mission statement, if you like, their goal is to create the highest engagement between art and technology. And I've played a couple of hours of this game, and I mean, they're a very exciting studio moving forward. But I definitely get that feeling that it is an artwork, almost more than a
it is.
game.
It really is.
Yeah, it's good to hear you talk on that because I think it went a little bit under the radar, perhaps for some people.
Well, that's the fun thing because it's developed by Lentier, which is their flagship, but it's not published by an unknown company. I mean,
No, that's not.
for example, when I did it, it was through Numbskull, but it's published Numbskull in Europe, and I think it's Axis in North America. So I mean, two pretty well-known companies. So I mean, it's surprising that it went so under the radar. So I mean, I really don't recommend to pass.
No, no, it's done quite well on PC, which is funny. I think maybe just on console it disappeared. Now I have to ask you about this next game. I was surprised you were a co-collaborator on this game. We talked about it last week. Look, it's cheesy, it's childish, it's whatever, but it is the Gigantosaurus, the game.
Oh yes.
I'm not sure what your role in this was, whether you played it or edited it or what you did, but what did you think?
So a lot of the times, the person I mainly collaborate, if I collaborate with people, is Pete. Pete's a wonderful guy. I love him, and a lot of the times he and I will sometimes collaborate on things. And normally it's Paugi games we'll collaborate on, but occasionally we'll collaborate on other titles. And Pete and my relationship is interesting. Most of the times you think when there's collaboration, it's a 50-50. Pete and I don't generally work that way. Pete and I, it's the collaboration is, hey, it's a game that we both really enjoy. Let's do this game together. So we will collaborate out of passion for that game. It doesn't mean we'll work the same amount of effort on that game because Pete and my schedules are very different. So he might do more work on one guide, do more work on another guide. The collaboration is generally a name for the most part because Gigantosaurus, however you want to pronounce it, that was almost nominally all Pete. So I mean, my name's on there because I played it, I had the passion for it, and I have kids and I wanted it, and I put some input into it. But Pete was the star on that one. But there are guides that we collaborate where I do the brunt of the work and Pete put some interest in. I did House Flipper, for example. Pete played that. He platinumed it. He gave me a lot of input. He gave me some insight. But most of that was written by me and done by me. But the collaboration is done through the passion we have. So it's not we don't do it 50-50 per se normally. It's just it comes and goes depending on the guide. It's just the passion we have. There's a few that we do 50-50 on. Generally, like Headliner was one of them. Talking about processes, I want to put out there one guide specifically that I want to say a huge. I just want to get this off my chest. God, Paugi does so many of them. I can't remember exactly which Paugi it is. It's a Paugi one. I think it's Pick a Pix Colors 2 or anyways, it came out in January this year. I just as much as I love Catherine and I love Lightwood Studios and I love their games, they don't have the option in this game to zoom out to view the whole picture. And because sometimes we get pre-releases, we do the guide ready for the embargo. I've made the sole decision to not do Paugi games. Paugi games I will do. I won't touch Pick-a-Pix games anymore. So I made the foolish errand decision of back in January. Yes, let's do it, Pete. Let's collaborate. Pete and I did it. And since I'm the visual editor and everything at Knoef, I'm the one with the programs. So Pete sends me his. So we do like it'd be like 100 pixels wide by 60 pixels, 60 squares down, and you'd have to each screen could only fit like 20 by 20, so you'd take like 35 screenshots of one puzzle, and I'd have to stitch it together. Anyways, we had like we had this game for like 2 weeks, and it's like, hey, the embargo's in 2 weeks. I think I think the culminating effect was something like stitching together a grand total of like 960 screenshots. uh no, never again.
One time.
Until Paugi implements a zoom out feature on the Pix games, not touching them. 960. It was hell.
I can understand. Yeah.
It ate everything
Yeah.
because it's not so much that you just take two pictures and put them together. Because when you screenshot it, you can't zoom in or zoom out. So you'd have the border, you'd have the overall picture. So I'd have to open up every single picture, crop out just the puzzle portion, and I have to do it with the second one. Then I'd have to overlay them to make sure the lines aligned. And it took, I think I spent something like 30 to 40 hours just cropping pictures and stitching them. It was, no, not again.
I like it. I mean, you're touching the door on so many other games as well. So I think in the future we'll definitely have to get you on again. But I do want to bring up one more if I can, because I'm pretty sure you
Oh,
wrote the
sure.
guide for this at a recommendation. And this is a game that I felt cheated on. I really enjoyed it, and 4 hours in, I really didn't enjoy it at all. And I'm interested to see if you had a similar feeling or not. This is the Arc of Alchemist.
Arc of Alchemist, boy, you know, okay, so I can say this because Knoof only does trophy guides. We're not a review site. We're not a review site, so I can put my opinion. I can say something's good, not good, garbage, whatever. So I mean, I
Of
love
course.
games with building mechanics. My favorite game, Dark Cloud 2, has pretty much the best building mechanics of any game I've ever played. Love Dark Cloud 2. And so I saw that this had it. I saw that it had RPG mechanics. I saw that it had magic. I saw it has different elements, and I was like, yeah, I'll jump right into this. And you know what? I think it's Idea Factory. And I was like, yeah, I like that company. Yeah, I like building mechanics. I'll jump right into it. I was expecting a bit of a longer journey, but the thing is, the game's 10 hours long, and you beat the game, bada boom, bada bing. And then you'll spend literally the same amount of time to complete the entire game and double it to just reach the character level. And so it's a redundant amount of end game grind, but that's not my point. It's just the graphics, the level of what it had to represent, the building mechanics, the way it played, the depth of the game. This is the only. This is weird. Some games you can say is the only game like that on the PlayStation 4. Some games do have that accolade. Arc of Alchemist is one of them. Arc of Alchemist has the accolade of it is the only PlayStation 3, late PlayStation 2, earlier PlayStation 3 game put on the PS4. Like it's like it was made for PS2 or PS3 and just put on PS, like not remastered, not 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 touch it. It was just a game that they've found in like the warehouse of like early PS3 and was like, "Oh shit, we
Yes.
need to publish this," and just put it on PS4. Like it just felt outdated from the get-go.
Does a fantastic job though of getting you in before you realize you realize what you've gotten
Yeah.
yourself into. So
The other thing that I don't understand about the game is the cutscenes. It's the only game I've ever had like that. So, writing the guide, I'll load the game will load up, and I'll have a cutscene between the thick-eyed girl and whoever she's talking with. And then it's like, oh wait, I have to I have to do something first, and I don't have time in the game. I'll quit the game. I'll come back in like half an hour, load it up, and I'll load the same save file. I never played anymore. I never changed anything. No autosaves. It's a different cutscene. And I tested this out. I reloaded the same save file like 5 times. It was a different cutscene every time. I don't know what the cutscenes represent. I don't know what happens. They have cutscenes I don't know. Like it doesn't add anything to the story. It's generic, just banter, and I don't know the prerequisites for it. It was different every time I loaded it. It's just it was fascinating. It's the only game I know that's like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, look, fascinating is definitely one word for it. I'm glad I could sneak that one in, though. You know, that there had to be something. You know,
Oh yeah.
one maybe negative in so many positives today. So, look, I do want to say thank I do want to thank you, Sean. It's been fantastic for me to speak to you and to learn about your process and about your passion for gaming as well. And I'm so glad that you could come on and share with our listeners. And I am hoping that in the future I can extend the branch when you've forgotten about the experience, perhaps, and get you back on again.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
it
I don't mind. I can
yeah,
come on and represent Knoef anytime. I
perfect.
do want to say though that
Mm,
just a wrap up. I mean, not everybody will see this because I mean, not everybody follows me. Some people don't follow Knoef. Some people follow you, or some people follow the podcast, or just read the
mm.
podcast. Don't see everything. So I wanted to give an insight into the guide writing. So I'm coming up on my 1 year at Knoef, and I've compiled all the data for my guide writing. And to date, I mean, in the next 11 days, I will publish another guide, and this will be updated in the time. But at the current state of affairs that is now, I've put in 662 hours of gameplay into all the guides, and that's just for platinuming. That's not the testing things out in the game. That's just bare bones what is needed to platinum. There's 194,717 words in all my guides. So I mean,
Wow.
you're looking at in a year almost 700 hours and 200,000 words of text just strung into this. I mean, a lot of people don't understand the sheer amount of work that we go into to help people that we don't even really get a thank you. So I mean, it's just like I just want people to understand the magnitude of to not be at least a little bit appreciative in some way of the effort that a lot of us go through.
Look, I'm 100% behind you on that point. I've been for a long time. I've been an advocate of text and written guide writers. Well, I think you've given us a fantastic insight into what goes on behind the curtain about how the process actually works as well. Which I think as you say, I think a lot of thanks needs to be given, and I hope for things like this, for talking about it, for sharing your process, it will further extend to gamers in general and our audience as well, of what is involved. And if you're listening, if you've made it this far and you're listening and you're thinking, yeah, well, I use guides every day, but I never say thank you. I never do anything. Thanks is free. It
Yeah.
costs nothing. Yeah. Write something on the bottom of the guide, jump in Discord, jump on Twitter, send it, because these people writing these guides are humans. They're not machines. They have feelings too, then they're putting in a stunning amount of work, as we've heard today. So reach out and say something. And if for no other reason, then it will help you build a bridge with these people, because they're very helpful. They recommend games. Yeah, they could help you to find stuff that you want to play as well, because they're so well read across so many games as well. So
It really it is really even even just something like dropping a Twitter handle and saying I used your guide. Just acknowledgement that our guides were seen is more than enough. For example,
mm,
I was speaking to somebody about 2 weeks ago. They messaged me and asked me a question about a guide, and they had a problem. They had missed a step, and I postponed my guide writing that night. Downloaded the game because it's been about 8 months since I wrote the guide, and I have all my save files and never delete them. So I kind of spent about 45 minutes figuring out what he messed up on and tried alternate ways, which I could help him. So I mean, we don't, at least for me, we generally will go out of our way to help, even if you messed up the guide, to try and help you. And the nice thing is, he said that I remember every word vividly so well when people reach out to me. He was saying that the last time he's received this amount of help and politeness on reaching out to somebody was back in like the early days of Game FAQs, when he was speaking to guide writers there when they were a lot more active. So it's amazing to hear that somebody's experience has gone a decade without such pleasantries, and it's like it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that distant between connecting players and writers.
that's fantastic to hear. As always, listeners, with this podcast, the most honesty always comes towards the end. I find, where as we're wrapping up, but it's wonderful to hear, because we've had other guide writers on before, and I alluded to last week. Listeners, you probably don't know, but quite often, with all the guests, I indulge on them, and we talk before usually we record, sometimes for quite a while. We talk about a lot of things that we never record, and one of the things I constantly hear from guide writers is, a lack of recognition, or, a lack of all this, or it's a waste of time because, nobody, acknowledges it or anything else. And it is nice to hear someone, refreshingly speak honestly that that is the case, and that it is so easy to fix. With that in mind, then how can, and if you're happy to, how can people reach out to you? How can people find you?
If you're using a Knoef guide, at the top of every guide, right at the very start bio, where it says how long a guide takes, how difficult it is, the missables and stuff. It has a link right there that you click that takes us to the Knoef Twitter, and I mean we have Knoef Twitter, we've got Discord, we got different social medias that you can reach out on. But I mean, it's just a click of that, and our at least mine is, our PSNs are usually on the website under our bios, or you can find them on our Twitters.
Perfect. So once again, thank you so much for today. I know we ran a little bit long, listeners, but it was a really interesting conversation. I do want to thank you, Sean, so much for giving up your time today. So, listeners, there you go. A bit of a deep dive into visual novels, into guide writing, and, well, just process, I suppose. Go on, check out Sean, the Otaku Lion, TigressLion on PSN at Knoef's Guides. But why don't we mosey on over now to your platinums? Did you use a guide? Did you remember to thank the guide writer? Well, Push2Plat Platinum shoutouts. Now remember, if you'd like a shoutout, all you have to do is join the free PSN PS4 community, Push2Plat Platinum Club, or you can drop a picture or the name of the Platinum, or both if you like, into the Discord, the Push2Plat Discord, which can be found in the show notes. So why don't we knock off Cool Kid Joe first? If you caught this week's level cap, you'll know about his journeys with the Little Adventure on the Prairie, and that's where he starts us off. Massive week for him this week. Number 361 and 362, Little Adventure on the Prairie, PS4 and Vita. Number 363, Read 2, NA Vita. Number 364, Midnight Deluxe, EU PS4. Number 365, Midnight Deluxe, NA PS4. Number 366, Blind Men, EU Vita. Number 367, Rush Rover, EU Vita. Number 368, Read 2, EU Vita. Number 369, Random Heroes, EU Vita. Number 370, Thunderpaw, EU Vita. Look, you cannot get a better spam representation than that. Fantastic, fantastic job, sir, on your Platalicious week. In fact, listeners, he put in the Discord, he's a cheeky monkey, he put in the Discord, gotta spam harder. Look, if he spams any harder, he's going to go blind. So congratulations, sir, on this week. Redbeard Rick bringing some quality, well, a little bit of quality, I suppose, to the proceedings. Number 142, Lego Harry Potter Collection Year 1 to 4. But I did see that Rick went on a bit of a tyrant against this game and warning, that he should never play another one because of the grind. So look, I'm sure that'll last a week or two, and then he'll be back on the Legos. Number 143, Hex Tunnel NA Stack VR spam. It really is. Dino Roar, number 1040. It just seems like the other day you're on Plat 1000, sir. It's crazy. And this is a Concept Destruction, an interesting modern indie take on a destruction derby type game. Around an hour for the Plat and nothing too difficult. In fact, I believe that is the Rattle-Like Game of the Week. And sir, I've actually been working on that game on and off all day while I've been editing and just doing random stuff around the house. So look, I may hopefully plat it as well, but I'm enjoying it. Any card game is good by me. I'm styling on your bro. What can he drop on us this week, listeners? Number 211, LIS. Oh, Life is Strange, Before the Storm, of course. It's not like some disease he's carrying, their sexual disease, the LIS, that's right. Before the Storm. David, good job on this prequel. I was milling over getting this for a while, but the story was on fire. Some crazy stuff happened that should have had an ambulance called. Definitely rejoice. Oh my goodness. It's just rejoice. At the fact this prequel closure was worth it. Oh my. He probably spent longer writing that than he did platinuming the game. So congratulations, sir. Number 212, Life is Strange 2. This game, it is vapored as a decaffeinated Red Bull. This deserves nothing clever because it offered nothing clever. That's harsh, but look, I think he's American. It's not surprising. The game is pretty anti-establishment and American, so I can understand why he'd feel that way. But look, I enjoyed it, listeners. I think it's still worthy of your time. Number 213, Shadow of the Colossus. He plays all the best games. I took on a many-armed form. And said, "Now I am become Death, Destroyer of Worlds." As this game set me off into a constant atomic chain reaction of thermonuclear rage, like none has before. As I climbed down, it left me with such a seething 0 degree Kelvin, cold-hearted disdain. My nipples were hard the entire time I played. Wow, that's like something straight out of 50 Shades of Grey, isn't it? Good on you, sir. I mean, I don't know anything about the game from that, but if that tickled your fancy while you tickled your fancy, then so be it. Oh, listeners, I'm a little revved up after that. I think Zuche, number 35. Zuche, number 35 here, Spyro 3, Year of the Dragon. Congratulations, that is a massive collectathon, I'm told. And number 36, Nier Automata. Such an amazing game. Well, look, it's probably one of my favorite JRPGs of all times. It's a stunning game. I'm sure you've played it, listeners. If you haven't, then I don't know why you haven't. You should. You should. It's a rite of passage for Eastern games, definitely. It's amazing, amazing. And Ed the Shed 2014, number 98, The Complex. The most recent FMV game. Of course, we've got another FMV game to look forward to soon, listeners. Evenings with Poe and Monroe, which will be fantastic. Of course, the radio presenters from the Shapeshifting Detective have their FMV coming out on Steam, I believe, in less than a week, and consoles later this year. Although The Complex, in its own right, different company, of course, in its own right, a fantastic game. And I particularly like the way they handled the fast forward options after you'd seen scenes. So I hope you enjoyed that as well. And then we have a new member here, SS Squarehead. I'm going to call you SS Squarehead, even though it's actually Squarehead, because that's how I first read it, and I thought that was fantastic. Number 20, Soul Calibur 6, A New Story of Swords and Platinums. That's a massive platinum, so I dropped off that game, but I very much enjoyed it. So congratulations to you on a wonderful platinum. As I said, listeners, if you're interested in getting your platinum shouted out, you know what to do. Drop it in the community or drop it on the Discord. So look, I'm going to sign off and leave you there. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful to converse today and learn so much. I hope if you've made it this far, you found the journey enjoyable. If you're thinking of starting on the visual novel genre, then I think there were some wonderful tips there as well. And look, if you're going to continue to skip and spam your way to 1 million trophies with the ends, more power to you, of course. Now, don't forget, this show is available on all good podcast providers, plus YouTube. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so on Twitter at push2plat, or at email on push2plat@gmail.com. Feel free to drop in the Discord and say hi to. They're a fairly nice bunch most of the time, and that will be in the show notes. So until next week, listeners, play hard, game harder, earn those trophies, smash the plats. See you in a week. Push to Plat is written, conceived, and edited by CJ Anderson in Adobe Audition. Push to Plat can be found on all good podcast providers, plus YouTube. YouTube uploading handled by repurpose.io. Push to Plat wishes to thank Patreon producers Olsero and Zador VP. If you wish to support the show, jump onto Patreon and search Push to Plat.